Hi, this is the float test program. I called it the float test program because originally I was just playing around with floats. I've added a lot more functionality to it, but I haven't come up with a better name, so it's float test. This program allows me to dynamically try various things without a lot of hand coding. So I was able to do a lot of experiments that might not have bothered with, and just make discoveries of things I wouldn't even tried because I could dynamically change all these values. So a lot to learn, a lot to go through, but let me first just start out by showing you a little bit of what it can do. So I'll make this first divide a little bigger. All this stuff could be done at the page level as well, but I like having the parent menu that this provides, so you'll see what I mean in a minute. So I'm going to add a couple of divides, float this one left, float this one right, and add a bunch of text, and you can see that it's floating around there, probably the way you expect it to. But say I want to change things around. So say I've decided I want to float this one left as well. So I float left and I say, well, okay, that's not what I wanted. I want it down here. So what you do is you clear it left. So now everything's good again. So now I liked it better on the right. So you clear it, float right. So that's not what I wanted either. Oh yeah, I've still got clear left. So can clear the clear and everything's back the way it was. And of course, then you can add content here. So that's more text. This one's an image over here, and then if you want to see what it looks like without all the bulky menus, you can hide them all and get a fairly good idea of what it would look like in the real world. So that's what you can do. To start with, that's the way the thing works, the way it looks. Let me get rid of this and zoom in a little bit and maybe show you some of these buttons and how they work. Now, when you zoom in on a browser, it doesn't really zoom; it just renders bigger. So the titles, these helpful titles that show you what the buttons are and what the keyboard shortcuts aren't going to be any bigger for you now. But the buttons are going to be bigger, so they can be a little easier to see. Each one of these, it's what I call a super divide. Each one of these is made from a large divide around the outside and a smaller divide on the inside. This divide is a direct parent of the outer divide with all these buttons kind of nested between the two of them. And then this is floated into place. Both of these tables, or divides, the outside and the inside, are display table. I did that because that's what I usually want, actually, and it just looks cleaner. If I add another divide and I resize it out, it stretches the container and just looks nice. And okay, so starting at the top here, this is the actual ID of the object. I just use numbers and increment the numbers. This isn't the next number because we made all those other elements before and it just keeps going. But if I make another one, it'll be the next number. Now in image you don't see that, but if you select it, then you get that parent menu I was talking about, and up in here you can see that it is in fact the next one. Paragraphs do have the number showing at the beginning of the paragraph, and if I select it, you can see that it's also reflected here in the parent menu. So as you can see, these buttons are for adding new elements: divide, image, paragraph, text area. That's new. I'll talk about that in a minute. It kind of goes beyond the bounds. I was really tempted to not release this yet, but it really can be pretty useful. This one deletes the contents of the object, and this one deletes the object itself. So now I have to use the keyboard shortcut. I hold down A and hit D, and I get a new divide. Right, in the next row, this is the sizer buttons. They've actually been rotated to make them look cool. This will make it wider. This makes it narrower. This makes it taller, even though it's the button on the bottom. This makes it shorter. At the time, it seemed intuitive to me. If it's not, you'll get used to it. It's easy enough to get to do. These are the float buttons. This is where it started out, was just this panel right here. To float it left, I click on float left. None's where it was. Float right. See, it works at page level. It floats it right. You're not going to be able to see. Let me zoom out and I'll add another divide. Add divide. See, it starts out floating because, well, this is already floated. If I don't want the can, if I want things floating around it, I can float it, but if I don't want it up here, if I don't want it floated, then I can clear left. And or clear none, put it back where it was. Clear right, which will do nothing because I don't have anything floated right. Or clear both, which will do something because I do have something floated left. Alright, so resize, floats, and clears. And that's a lot right there. I've played with that quite a bit. Got a pretty good handle on how float worked. But of course, then it started running into other things I wanted to do. And for one thing, one of the first was just dealing with this whole display table thing. You don't always want display table. Sometimes you want something to stay at a fixed size and develop a scroll bar or something. So I put this button in here. The default in this program is display table, but I can also make it display block. Now once it's display block, I add content and it starts spilling out. Get rid of that one for now. But if you don't want that, you go over here to the middle row and you can either hide it or scroll it. So if you want a scroll bar, you have to go with display block. Display table is just going to accommodate it. So no matter what your overflow settings are. The outside can also be turned to block. This helps for when you're floating the contents of a divide around another divide. You need them both to be blocked for it to work. And so there you go. If I put it back to the default, then it stretches to accommodate the. If I get rid of the content, you can see how much the stretch was. Buttons down here are for positioning. So you start out in the default, which is position static, which means everything just fits into the normal flow of the HTML through the DOM. But you can also position things. So if I say I position it, if I position this one relative, then well, nothing happens because I haven't given it a top, left, or side, and so it stays relative to where it was. But if I go with absolute, you're going to actually see a difference. The divide below has moved up to take its place. See, relative, even though it's out of the flow in a way, it still holds its regular position in the DOM. Absolute takes it completely out of the flow, doesn't hold its position anymore at all. If I go with fixed, then, and again, it's staying where it is because there's a difference between top 0, left 0, and just no top and no left at all. Without specifically saying what a top, left, or bottom, or right, or whatever is, it just stays where it was. But with fixed, it's already one difference too, which is if we add a divide, get this off float, just so I have something to size down beyond the bottom of the page. And now when I scroll, you can see fixed stays in the same position relative to the screen, where the others do not. They stay relative to where you put them. Oh, right. That one popped out from behind. Okay, well, let's add another one back in. So the differences in behavior become more dramatic once you actually assign a top, left, or right, or bottom. And that's what one of the things these 4 buttons are for. These 4 buttons actually are specifically because I wanted to be able to float, fixed toolbar in, say, the lower right-hand corner of the screen. So if I click this button here, it now actually will assign a 0 to top and left. And I'm in there, so nothing's changed. But if I go top right, nothing's changed and nothing's changed because I'm in relative. Now if I go with absolute, then it popped way down here. If I hit that again, it goes like that. Hit that again, it goes over here. Now it's going at page level because its parent is not positioned. Once I position its parent, now it'll be relative to its parent. So I put it like that, I put it like that, and There you go. So this is kind of a specific set of um, things that I wanted to do. Now, but if you want to position them otherwise, all you have to do, if you look at the parent menus, you can see that the 0, 0 is for bottom left. If I go to top right, then it changes it to top 0 and or top left, and left is 0. If I want to position it anywhere at all, I can do so by holding down the control key and just moving it to where I want it to be. Now if I change these things, which I can do from the parent menu, it still goes from the corners. It just swaps those values around, so it goes from to the corners from where they were. Basically, you're going to just want to hit probably the top and left, and then drag it to where you want to go. So yeah, you can just put anything anywhere you want. You can just hard position everything anywhere. And if I were to make that fixed, it moved because it went from being relative to its parent to being relative to the page, regardless of how the parent is positioned. And it stays right where it was on the screen. So that leaves this set of buttons here. This is related to positioning. This is Z-index. I see a lot of confusion about Z-index. I had a lot of confusion about Z-index because, well, it's weird. First off, to get Z-index to work, you have to position the thing. A static positioned element, Z-index won't work, so I don't even allow you to set it. If you position something any way at all, and you can move it around, and it can then develop a Z-index. Now, let me start over so that we can be clear about this. We had two divides, say 19 and 20. This one's first in the DOM, then this one. If we position both of them, then when I move this one, it's underneath. The objects pile on top of each other through the DOM, so siblings. So this one will move underneath that one. If I add content to both of these, then anything in this first divide should stay underneath anything in this divide. That's the behavior we want. And that's one of the thing that confused a lot of people, and even me at the beginning, is that if you change the Z-index on this, oops, I got to position it. You expect it now. This is Z-index 4. It should be above everything that's not positioned. So hold down the control key, and oh hey, look at that! It is in fact above everything else, and that's not right. That's actually, I mean, if that's what you want, this is what you want to do. If that's the behavior you want. The reason that this is happening is because I haven't actually given these things a index value at all. And again, there's a difference between 0 and not set. So if I give this a value of 1 and this a value of 1, then now it behaves correctly. It stays underneath. And if I give this a value of 2, now it behaves correctly and everything stays above it. So even if I take this and bump it up to, got to position it, bump it up to, I don't know, 20 or something. Let's just go with 15. It's going to stay underneath because the parents are in control of this. And it's too late now to put it back. So even if I move both to 0, it's not the same thing as no value at all. And we still have the correct behavior, that everything in this box is going to be over everything in this box because its Z-index is higher than this one. I put this back to 0 now too. Then it goes underneath. When they're at the same Z level, then it defaults to DOM order. So that's how Z-index works. I've seen all kinds of crazy examples. People complaining, I put my Z-index at 999 and it still won't pop up. Well, you either need to take off, don't even assign a position to parents, don't even assign a Z-index to it, and then you can get that screwy behavior, or just the things you want on top, put them later in the DOM, put them under the same parent, and that's how you do the Z-index. Now the parent menu, it's got most of the same panels over here, and that is handy because if you pick something like a paragraph or an image, they don't have menus on them, so they are affected by this. I can now use this and position it, and get it to bounce around the screen just like anything else. We do the same thing with paragraphs, so see some of the paragraph behaviors. You're going to want to size the paragraphs, which yes, you can do. When you first start sizing it, it goes to the smallest size, and so don't be afraid of it popping out. Yep, see there, you got to watch these buttons move when the frame moves. A little awkward, but it is so worth it. So if you resize it all the way down, one more click and it'll go back to normal, where it just simply fills all the available space. Let's select this image and position it out of my way. Then I can resize this box, and you can see paragraphs just expand in width to take up all the available space. So that's hardly everything, but that's a lot of it. It's enough to get started. Let me just show you one more example. Let me start over. This is something I see quite a bit online. Speculation on how do you get an image to float between two columns. There's no float middle, so how do you do that? Well, you need two divides. If you're going to have an image floating in the middle, you can't have things wrapping around the image. It'd be confusing. You're going to have two columns. So we'll take the two columns, float one of them left, too wide, and then add a divide to each one of them. We're going to float this one right and float this one left. So now we have text floating around both sides of them. Now we're going to want to size these a little bit. This one we're going to want to make block because we're going to add our image here. Now we size our image, and you can see it overflows this way. So now if I collapse all the borders, voila, you have an image in between, floating text on both sides of it effectively. If you don't have these in the right DOM order, you can select this. Let's see. You can select this one and then position it. Let's resize this for a second just so I can get to the buttons. Oh, right, wrong. Use the parent menu. Positioning it will pop it to the top. We don't need to in this case, but you also could put the image over here. Frankly, make this block. Put in an image. Resize. Oops, not that. Again, resize the image, and then float it right. Now, if we hide all the borders, we've got both images, one on top of the other, floating in the middle of the pieces of text. Anyway, hopefully, as you can see by now, this is a very useful program. I'm so glad I wrote it. It has saved me so much time. I've done experiments that I wouldn't have bothered with, and I've made discoveries, I think I've said this already, that by accident that I never would have even thought of trying, but just because it's so easy to just change all the properties on the fly and do whatever I want. So, I'm sorry. I did tell you I would show you how this works. This is I needed an experiment. I'm having something I want to do with the text area involving scrolling. I found out I can't actually do it. I can do it with divides, but I can't do it if the inside divide is a text area instead. So I ended up having to do a workaround. So this tool, which usually shows me how to do things, can also show you that some things can't be done, at least not directly. I say I found a workaround, but as a result, now this is in the program. Now to give it some functionality, I decided to make it create paragraphs. So if you put text in here and double click on it, now it creates a proper paragraph with a title and everything else. So you can affect it with see, you can float paragraphs with the menus. However, as a side effect, consequence of that, you can also just add HTML in here. And So you can add any element you want now at this point by just putting the HTML in here. Um, that's why I hesitate to release this version yet, because once you do that, you don't have the proper ID, so you don't have access to any of the the parent menus or whatever. But you can, if you're careful, you can just put anything in you want. It just puts the thing next, but you can drag and drop stuff. So you use this to create stuff, and then put it where you want it. So if you stick with just divides, images, and paragraphs, I guarantee the behavior. If you get going along and things aren't acting the way you expect them to, don't doubt the program. It's working. It's well tested and well used. But you start adding stuff through this text area, the behavior should be correct, but you're not going to be able to monitor it as well. And of course, it depends on how well you code. If you make a mistake in your HTML, then it can cause all kinds of problems. So be careful with that. Otherwise, like I say, this is very useful, and I hope you find some use out of it too. Good luck.